The mind does not obsess over things it has resolved, only over things it hasn't. That person you keep replaying conversations with at 2 a.m., the one you have already talked yourself out of 100 times, your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, and the reason it will not stop has nothing to do with how much you miss them. It has to do with something much older and much harder to escape. In the 1920s, a Russian psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik was sitting in a cafe in Vienna when she noticed something strange about the waiters. They could recall every open order in the room with perfect accuracy. Table numbers, every small detail. The moment a bill was paid and the order closed, they forgot it entirely. She went back to her laboratory and spent the next several years proving what she had observed. The human brain does not treat finished and unfinished things equally. It holds unfinished things open, actively, urgently. Like a door it cannot stop trying to close. She called it the Zeigarnik Effect, and it explains almost every obsession you have ever had. The brain was never built to let things go unresolved. For most of human history, that was a feature, not a flaw. An unresolved threat in your environment needed to stay active in your mind until it was dealt with. An unfinished hunt, a conflict with someone in your group, a wound that still needed tending. The brain kept those files open because closing them too early could get you killed. The problem is that the brain cannot tell the difference between an unresolved physical threat and an unresolved emotional one. It treats them exactly the same way, which means the moment a relationship ends without a clean explanation or a conversation finishes without a real resolution, that file stays open indefinitely, and your mind keeps returning to it the same way your tongue keeps finding a loose tooth. Not because you want to, because it cannot stop. That is not weakness. That is ancient wiring running in a modern situation it was never designed for. In 2010, a neuroscientist named Helen Fisher put people who had recently been rejected by someone they loved inside a brain scanner. She showed them photographs. First a photograph of a friend, then a photograph of the person who had rejected them. The difference in brain activity was immediate and dramatic. When they looked at the person who had rejected them, the regions that activated were not primarily the emotional centers of the brain. They were the dopamine reward circuits, the same pathways that fire when someone is addicted to a substance. Obsession is not grief, it is craving. The brain had not filed the relationship under loss, it had filed it under want. And want, unlike grief, does not fade with time. It intensifies with distance. Every time you think about them, your brain releases a small pulse of dopamine. Not because thinking about them feels good, but because the brain is running a search. It is looking for resolution. It is looking for the moment the loop closes. And every time it does not find one, it tries again, harder. You are not thinking about them because you love them. You are thinking about them because your brain is running a program it cannot figure out how to stop. But there is something underneath the Zeigarnik effect that most people miss. Something that makes certain obsessions worse than others, because not every unresolved relationship creates the same intensity of loop. Some people you lose and the grief is clean. You mourn them and you move through it. Others you lose and the loop runs for years, decades, sometimes forever. The difference is not how much you loved them, the difference is what they represented. Psychologists who study attachment have found that the people we cannot stop thinking about are almost never just themselves. They are symbols. They carry the weight of something older, something unresolved that existed long before they arrived, a need that was never met, a wound that was never acknowledged, a version of love you were shown once and then had taken away before you understood what you were losing. When you meet someone who unconsciously mirrors that original wound, your brain does not just fall for them, it assigns them a task. It says, this is the person who can finally close the loop. This is the one who can give me what I never got. And when they leave, or when they fail to give it, the brain does not just miss them. It goes back into search mode, because the loop is still open. And now it is older and heavier than it was before they arrived. You were never just thinking about them. You were thinking about everything they stood for. This is why logic does not work on obsession. You already know this. You have tried it. You have made the lists, reminded yourself of their flaws, talked yourself through it with friends who said all the right things. And for a few hours, maybe even a few days, it worked. Then the loop came back, louder. That is because logic operates in the prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of the brain. Obsession operates in the limbic system, the ancient, emotional, survival-oriented part that does not speak the language of reason. You cannot think your way out of an emotional loop any more than you can think your way out of hunger. The systems do not talk to each other that way. What the limbic system responds to is not argument. It is completion. The loop needs an ending, not an explanation, not a reason. an ending. In the 1970s, a psychologist named Roy Baumeister began studying what he called the need for closure, the brain's fundamental drive to reach a definitive conclusion on unresolved questions. He found that people with a high need for closure became more obsessive under uncertainty, more likely to fixate on incomplete information, and significantly more vulnerable to rumination after relationship endings. He also found something that most people find deeply uncomfortable. Closure almost never comes from the other person, the people we wait on to give us resolution, the explanation, the apology, the final conversation that finally makes sense of everything. Almost never deliver it. Not because they are cruel, because they cannot give you what they never had. The loop was never about them. It was about something in you that was unfinished long before they walked in. And the ending your brain is waiting for is one that only you can write. The obsession loop does not break when the other person comes back. It does not break when they apologize. It does not break when you finally understand what went wrong. It breaks when the part of you that assigned them the task realizes the task was never theirs to complete. That realization is not a moment. It is a process, and it is slower and less dramatic than the stories we tell ourselves about healing. There is no single conversation that closes it. No single morning you wake up and find it gone, but there is a direction, and the direction is always inward. The loop is not about them. It never was. It is about the unfinished version of you that handed them the keys to something they were never equipped to unlock. That version of you is still waiting, still running the search, still returning to the same face, the same words, the same 2 a.m. silence. Not because they were the answer, because you have not yet decided to be.